I've extracted venom from the world's deadliest snakes, but nothing prepared me for the poison of falling for someone who was meant to be just another experiment. The Halloween party throbbed around me, strobe lights pulsing in rhythm with some generic pop song while I stood in the corner nursing a vodka tonic that had long since lost its chill. My snake charmer costume, complete with realistic cobra headdress and scale-patterned bodysuit, had seemed clever when I'd put it together. Now it just felt like another layer of armor I'd built around myself since David left. "You stole my idea." The voice came from behind, smooth as silk with just enough edge to make the tiny hairs on my arms stand up. I turned, and there she was, another snake charmer, her costume nearly identical to mine except where mine was emerald. Hers was crimson. The strobe caught her red hair, making it flicker like flames. "Great minds," I said, raising my glass. The ice cubes clinked softly, a tiny orchestra playing just for us amid the chaos. "Or fools," she replied with a smile that dimpled one cheek. "Holly Thompson. Maya Henderson." Our hands met, and I noticed the slight callus on her thumb, a researcher's hand, someone who held pipettes and scribbled notes. Mine were rougher, marked with tiny scars from years of handling creatures most people ran from. "Let me guess," she said, leaning close enough that I caught the scent of something citrusy and expensive. "You work with actual reptiles, not just dressing as their handler." The music seemed to fade as our eyes locked. Hers were green, not the fake contacts kind of green, but the real deep forest shade that made me think of jungle expeditions and hidden dangers. "Venom extraction specialist at the Nairobi Reptile Center," I admitted. "You're either psychic or stalking me." "Neither. You have the look, calm, hyper-aware, ready to move if something strikes. Plus, that tiny scar on your wrist is from a snakebite, rear-fanged species, if I had to guess." The vodka suddenly felt warmer in my throat. "Should I be concerned that you know that much about snake bites?" "Only if you're a snake." Her laugh rippled through the air between us. "I research antivenoms. We're basically cosmic opposites. You collect the poison, I create the cure." Outside, rain began to patter against the windows, a gentle percussion accompanying our conversation. A flash of lightning illuminated her face, catching something in her expression I couldn't quite read. "Dance?" she asked, holding out her hand. Something about her felt dangerous and safe all at once. Like a beautiful snake you know won't bite you but could. We moved to the dance floor, our costumes mirroring each other in the dim light. As we swayed to music that suddenly seemed to exist just for us, her hands found my waist, steady and sure. "I've been looking for someone like you," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. "Someone who understands venom." When her lips brushed against mine, testing, questioning, I felt a rush more potent than any snakebite antidote. I leaned in, tasting mint and possibility as the room spun around us. It wasn't until months later, after the psychological experiment that revealed our deepest fears, after I discovered why she'd really been at that party, that I understood the truth. Sometimes the person extracting your venom is also the one creating your antidote. 3 days after the Halloween party, I stood in the extraction room at the Nairobi Reptile Center, Holly watching from behind the safety glass. I'd invited her on impulse, partly professional courtesy, partly because I couldn't get the taste of her lips out of my mind. "This one's a black mamba," I explained through the intercom. "Same species that almost killed my colleague last month." My hands moved with practiced precision as I unlatched the mamba's enclosure. The snake was alert, its body tensing as I approached with the handling hook. This was the dance I knew best, more intimate than any I'd shared at the Halloween party. "Aren't you scared?" Holly's voice crackled through the speaker, her breath fogging the glass slightly as she leaned closer. "Terrified," I admitted, never taking my eyes off the mamba. "That's what keeps me alive." The extraction itself took less than 2 minutes. Hook, grasp, position, collect. The mamba's fangs pierced the collection membrane, delivering clear venom into the vial below. The droplets gathered like liquid diamonds, worth more per gram than gold, and infinitely more dangerous. When I emerged from the extraction room, Holly's eyes were wide with something between admiration and professional interest. "That was," she started. "Just another Tuesday," I finished, though we both knew it wasn't. Something had shifted between us, as if watching me work with death had created a new intimacy. Later, over coffee in my cluttered office, Holly ran her fingers over a line of venom vials in my specialized refrigerator. "I've been working on something," she said. "A universal antivenom that could revolutionize treatment protocols worldwide." Her voice quickened with excitement, hands gesturing as she described protein markers and antibody responses. I found myself watching her fingers, elegant but strong, remembering how they had felt against my waist. "The problem is, I need fresh samples from specific species, rare ones. And you think I can help you get them?" "I know you can," Holly said, her voice dropping lower. "Your extraction technique is the cleanest I've seen. No contamination, no degradation." She stepped closer, the scent of her perfume, something with sandalwood and citrus, filling the small space between us. Her hand brushed mine as she reached for one of the vials, the touch deliberate. "We could help each other, Maya." There was something in her tone, professional, yet not. My skin prickled with awareness. "What's in it for me?" I asked, surprised by the huskiness in my voice. "Besides advancing medical science," Holly smiled, her green eyes crinkling at the corners. "I could credit you as a collaborator on the research. It would open doors." The next day, I found myself in Holly's lab, delivering freshly extracted venom from a gaboon viper. The lab hummed with expensive equipment and the quiet concentration of research assistants. "This is incredible," Holly said, holding the vial to the light. "Look at the clarity." Our hands touched again as I passed her another sample, the contact sending sparks up my arm. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. "What made you choose this field?" I asked, desperate for conversation to break the growing tension. "My brother was bitten by a coral snake when we were kids," she said, her focus still on the vial. "The hospital didn't have the right antivenom. He survived, but it was close." I nodded, understanding how personal trauma shapes professional paths. Wasn't that why I'd started extracting venom after my own encounter with a mamba as a teenager? As we worked side by side, pipetting venom into test tubes, our bodies kept finding reasons to touch, an accidental brush of shoulders, fingers meeting over a microscope adjustment. Each contact felt charged, dangerous in a way completely different from my daily work. "There's something else," Holly said as we were finishing. "My research institute is running a psychology experiment. They're paying well for participants with unique relationships to danger. You think I qualify?" I laughed. "I think you're perfect," she replied, her eyes holding mine a beat too long. "The way you handle fear fascinates me." I should have seen it then, the calculation behind the invitation. But her fingers were tracing circles on the back of my hand, and all I could think about was how much I wanted those fingers elsewhere. "Ill-considerate," I said. "Good." Holly smiled, and for just a moment I thought I glimpsed something predatory in her expression, the same look the mamba gives just before it strikes. The psychology lab looked more like a spa than a research facility, all muted colors and ambient lighting, with none of the clinical sterility I'd expected. That should have been my first warning. "You're sure this is legitimate research?" I asked Holly as she led me down a hushed corridor. 2 weeks had passed since her initial invitation, during which we'd spent increasing amounts of time together. Professionally, of course. "The Hartman Institute is the leading neuropsychology research center in East Africa," Holly said, squeezing my hand. "And the compensation will cover replacing your extraction equipment." She knew exactly what to say. My specialized tools had been deteriorating, and the reptile center's budget was frozen again. Still, something felt off. "What exactly am I signing up for?" "A study on how high-risk professionals process fear," Holly explained. "Specifically, whether repeated exposure to danger creates unique subconscious patterns." The lead researcher, Dr. Edwin Walsh, greeted us with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. My instincts hummed a warning note, the same feeling I get when a snake's behavior pattern changes unexpectedly. "Miss Henderson, we're very interested in your psychological profile," he said, scanning my intake forms. "Few people choose a career where death is a daily possibility." His office smelled of sandalwood and old books, with certificates covering the walls like trophies. As he outlined the process, hypnosis, cognitive tests, brain scans, I found myself watching Holly. She seemed too interested, her eyes never leaving my face. "Will you be here during the sessions?" I asked her. Something flickered across her features. "I'll be nearby," she said. That was the first lie I caught. The initial session began with standard questions about my childhood, my career choice, my risk tolerance. Then Dr. Walsh dimmed the lights and began the hypnosis induction, his voice dropping into a rhythmic pattern that pulled me under despite my resistance. I remember fragments after that, speaking about things I'd never told anyone. The first time I was bitten, not as a professional but as a terrified child in my grandmother's garden, how the venom burned through my veins. How I'd almost died but felt more alive than ever once I recovered. And deeper things. How I measured relationships by their danger levels. How intimacy scared me more than any snake. How I'd sabotaged my engagement to David because domesticity felt like suffocation. What about current relationships? Dr. Walsh's voice seemed to come from far away. There's someone, I heard myself say. She collects my poison even as she draws it out. When I woke, the room was empty except for Dr. Walsh. Through the fog of post-hypnotic confusion, I noticed a slight discoloration on one wall, a one-way observation mirror. Was someone watching? I asked, my mouth dry. The sessions are recorded for research purposes, Dr. Walsh replied smoothly. You signed the consent form. Outside, Holly was waiting, her face composed but her fingers tapping nervously against her thigh. How was it? She asked too casually. Invasive, I said. What aren't you telling me? Nothing that matters, she said, but wouldn't meet my eyes. Want to grab dinner? I know a place with great Ethiopian food. Over injera and spicy stews, she skillfully deflected my questions about the experiment while asking pointed ones about my extraction techniques. By the time we finished eating, with night settling over Nairobi like a velvet cloak, I'd almost forgotten my suspicions. Then her phone buzzed with a text. I caught a glimpse of Dr. Walsh's name before she turned it over. Work, she murmured. At 9 p.m.? Science never sleeps, she said, with a forced laugh. Later that night, unable to rest, I drove back to the institute. The security guard recognized me from earlier and waved me through with barely a glance. The corridor leading to the observation rooms was dark, but I knew my way. Years of working in dimly lit reptile houses had given me excellent night vision. Outside the room I'd been in, I hesitated, then tried the door to what would be behind the one-way mirror. It opened. Inside was a small observation area with recording equipment still running. On the monitor, I watched myself in hypnotic trance, confessing my deepest fears about intimacy. And there, in the corner of the frame, was Holly, clipboard in hand, watching me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. The subject shows classic avoidance patterns consistent with our hypothesis. Her voice came through the speakers. Recommendation? Proceed to phase 2 testing. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The sound echoed in the empty building. My phone buzzed, a text from Holly. Are you still awake? I can't stop thinking about you. As I stood there, listening to my own unconscious confessions while reading her message, I realized I'd willingly walked into a trap more dangerous than any snake pit. The question was, did she set it because of scientific curiosity or something more personal? I waited for Holly outside the Hartman Institute the next morning, anger simmering beneath my skin like venom working its way through a bloodstream. She spotted me and smiled, that same dimpled smile that had charmed me at the Halloween party, until she registered my expression. Maya, what's wrong? You watched me. I kept my voice low, controlled, the way I speak when handling the most unpredictable species. Behind the mirror, you listened to everything while I was under hypnosis. Color drained from her face. I can explain. You were taking notes about me like I'm some lab specimen. My hands clenched into fists. Was anything real? Or am I just research to you? It's complicated, Holly said, glancing around the parking lot where other researchers were arriving. Not here. No, right here, right now. She closed her eyes briefly. Yes, I was observing. That's part of my job. But what's happening between us is separate from that. Is it? A security guard looked our way, clearly noting the tension. Holly grabbed my wrist, her touch electric even through my anger, and pulled me toward her car. I need to show you something, she said. The drive was silent, heavy with unspoken accusations. Rain began to fall, soft at first then heavier, drumming on the roof of her car like impatient fingers. The windshield wipers created a hypnotic rhythm that reminded me uncomfortably of Dr. Walsh's induction techniques. When the skies truly opened, Holly swerved into my apartment complex rather than continuing to wherever she'd planned to take me. "We're not finished," she said as I moved to exit the car. "But we'll drown if we stay out here." Inside my apartment, Holly stood dripping on my worn welcome mat while I threw her a towel. The domesticity of the scene felt jarring against my sense of betrayal. "Talk," I demanded. "The research is legitimate," she began, toweling her red hair. The action made it wild around her face, framing her green eyes in a way that would have been captivating under other circumstances. "But you're right. I should have told you I'd be observing." "That's not all, though, is it?" I paced my small living room, past terrariums housing my personal collection of non-venomous snakes. A corn snake watched us with unblinking eyes. "Why me specifically? Out of all the risk-takers in Nairobi?" Holly's hesitation told me everything. "How long before the Halloween party did you know who I was?" She sank onto my couch, defeated. 2 weeks. Dr. Walsh had identified you as an ideal candidate. Your profile, single, isolated, high-risk profession, past trauma, it fit what we were looking for. So you approached me deliberately. I was supposed to recruit you, yes. The rain intensified, sheets of water cascading down my windows, turning the world outside into a blurry watercolor. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "And the kiss? Was that part of your recruitment technique?" Holly stood so suddenly it startled me. "No, that was real. That was me breaking protocol." She stepped toward me, her clothes still damp, clinging to her body. "I was supposed to maintain professional distance, observe and report. But the moment I saw you, really saw you, the experiment became secondary." "Convenient explanation," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. We stood there, inches apart, while lightning flashed outside, briefly illuminating her face. I saw hurt there, and something else, desire, unmistakable and raw. "I'm a scientist, Maya. I observe things. And what I've observed is that I haven't been able to think straight since I met you." Her hands reached for me, tentative, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. When our lips met this time, it wasn't the gentle exploration of Halloween night. This was desperate, searching, her hands tangling in my hair, my back pressing against the wall. The storm outside seemed to move through us, wild, uncontainable, as we pulled at each other's damp clothes. "I shouldn't want this," I gasped against her mouth. "Neither should I," she admitted, her fingers tracing fire down my spine. We stumbled toward my bedroom, a trail of wet clothes marking our path. Holly's skin was cool from the rain but warming quickly beneath my touch. Outside, thunder cracked directly overhead as she pressed me onto the bed. What followed was a blur of sensation, her mouth exploring every inch of me, my hands discovering what made her gasp and arch. We moved together with an urgency born of both desire and uncertainty, as if we might never get another chance. Afterward, tangled in sheets damp with rain and sweat, reality crashed back like a wave. "This doesn't fix what you did," I said into the darkness. "I know." Her fingers traced patterns on my bare shoulder. "But it's the truth of what I feel now." The next morning, Holly's phone rang early. Dr. Walsh's name flashed on the screen. "Yes?" she answered, sitting up, suddenly professional despite her nakedness. "I understand. No, that won't be a problem." When she hung up, her expression had hardened. "What is it?" I asked. "Dr. Walsh says I'm too personally involved with a test subject." Her voice was tight. "He's threatening to pull my funding if I don't maintain appropriate boundaries." "What will you do?" Holly looked at me, conflict clear in her eyes. "I don't know yet, but Maya, there are things about this study I haven't told you. Things you need to know." "What things?" I asked, watching Holly dress. Morning light streamed through the blinds, painting stripes across her bare shoulders before she pulled her shirt on. "The psychology experiment," she said, not meeting my eyes. "It's more targeted than I let on." I sat up, pulling the sheet around myself. "How targeted?" Holly perched on the edge of the bed, her weight creating a hollow that pulled me slightly toward her. "Dr. Walsh has been studying trauma responses in individuals with high-risk professions for decades. But this particular study," she hesitated, "it's about finding specific trauma profiles. And I fit one. Not just any profile. Finally, she looked at me. You were selected because your psychological evaluation from the reptile center showed particular markers. Childhood trauma with venomous creatures, yet subsequent career choice involving the same danger. Cold dread pooled in my stomach. How did Walsh get my psychological evaluation? Those are confidential. Holly's silence was answer enough. You gave it to him, I said, realization dawning. You had access through the Antivenom Research Partnership. I didn't know what he'd do with it initially, she said. He presented it as standard research protocol. I got up, needing distance. In my kitchen, I made coffee with mechanical movements while processing this betrayal. Holly followed, hovering in the doorway. The Halloween party, I finally said. That wasn't coincidence. No. The word hung between us. Walsh told me you'd be there. Said approaching you in a social setting would increase chances of participation. And the matching costume? Calculated. Her voice was small. I researched you, your interests. The coffee maker hissed and sputtered, filling the silence. I stared at it, unable to look at her. Maya. Holly stepped closer. What started as research changed. What's between us now is real. How can I possibly believe that? She reached for me, but I stepped away. The hurt in her eyes seemed genuine, but I'd seen her observing me through that mirror, clinical and detached, taking notes on my deepest fears. I need you to leave, I said. For 3 days, I ignored her calls and texts. I buried myself in work, extracting venom from more specimens than the center needed, losing myself in the controlled danger of my profession. With snakes, at least the danger was apparent. You knew where the fangs were. On the 4th day, Dr. Walsh called. Ms. Henderson, his smooth voice oozed through the phone. We missed you at your follow-up appointment. I'm done being your lab rat. That's unfortunate. Dr. Thompson spoke highly of your contribution. Dr. Thompson, I repeated, the formality a reminder of the professional distance that should have existed between us. Yes, her insights on your case have been invaluable. Though I fear her judgment has become compromised. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. What does that mean? Perhaps you should ask her. He paused. We'll expect you tomorrow at 2 p.m. to complete the exit interview. Compensation will be withheld until then. I needed that money for new equipment. Walsh knew it. The next day, I arrived at the institute to find Holly arguing with Walsh in the lobby, her voice carrying despite her obvious attempt to keep it down. You can't use that information. It's not what we agreed. She stopped when she saw me, her face a mixture of relief and apprehension. Maya. She moved toward me. I'm so glad you came. Walsh's smile was thin as a snake's tongue. Perfect timing. I was just explaining to Dr. Thompson the importance of maintaining research integrity. What does that mean exactly? I asked, looking between them. It means, Walsh said, that personal entanglements shouldn't interfere with scientific observations. Holly's hand found mine, squeezing gently. Come with me, please. She led me to a small conference room and closed the door. For a moment, she just stood there, as if gathering courage. Walsh is using the research for something beyond what I agreed to, she finally said. He's identifying people with specific trauma patterns for some private contractor. What kind of contractor? I don't know. But I found files, psychological profiles like yours, being sent to an email address outside the institute. I tried to process this. So I'm being what, headhunted? For what? I'm not sure, Holly admitted. But I think it's related to high-risk security work. Your comfort with danger makes you valuable. She moved closer, her fingertips brushing my cheek. When I realized what was happening, I tried to protect your data. That's what Walsh and I were arguing about. I wanted to believe her. Despite everything, I wanted to trust the connection that had grown between us. Come with me, she said suddenly. I need to show you something in the lab. Then you can decide if you believe me or not. As we walked down the corridor toward her research space, Holly's hand found mine again. This time, I didn't pull away. Whatever lies had started this, I needed to know the truth about the experiment, about Walsh's intentions, and about the woman who had extracted my secrets as skillfully as I extracted venom. Holly's lab was eerily quiet compared to the bustle we'd passed through. Late afternoon sun slanted through vertical blinds, casting prison bar shadows across stainless steel counters and sophisticated equipment. "Everyone's at the weekly staff meeting," she explained, locking the door behind us. "We have maybe 15 minutes." She moved to her computer and pulled up files with my name prominently displayed. Seeing my life reduced to data points and psychological assessments made my stomach clench. "Here," she said, pointing to notes attached to my profile. "Walsh has been adding these annotations after our sessions." I leaned closer, reading phrases like high trauma resilience, and candidate shows optimal stress response patterns. The clinical language made me feel like a specimen, not a person. "What does this mean?" I asked, finger hovering over a notation that read, Phase 2 eligible priority transfer. "That's what worries me." Holly's voice dropped. "I think Walsh is identifying candidates for some kind of specialized program. People who can function under extreme stress." A chill ran through me. Military? Or private security? The company name is redacted, but there's mention of forward deployment in hostile territories. As Holly showed me more files, a headache began building behind my eyes. Whether from stress or something else, I couldn't tell. Then, without warning, images flashed through my mind. A snake, coiled and ready to strike. My grandmother's garden, blood on white tiles. "Maya?" Holly's concerned face swam into focus. "You're pale. Sit down." Since the hypnosis sessions, these episodes had been happening more frequently. Fragments of memories I'd buried long ago surfacing without warning. "I keep seeing things," I admitted as she guided me to a chair. "Memories, I think. But disjointed, intense." Holly's expression shifted to something like guilt. "It's possible the hypnosis activated suppressed memories. The techniques Walsh uses are aggressive." My hands trembled slightly, an unusual sensation for someone who needed steady fingers to extract venom safely. What did he do to me? Standard hypnosis shouldn't cause this. Holly knelt before me, taking my hands in hers. "Let me help. Tell me what you're seeing." I closed my eyes, letting the fragments come. "I'm 8 years old. At my grandmother's house in Mombasa. There's a snake in the garden, a black mamba. I'm curious, not afraid yet." Holly's grip tightened. Go on." "It strikes. I feel the pain, the burning spread. Then hospital lights, people shouting, my grandmother crying." "This is the bite you told me about?" Holly prompted. "Yes, but there's more." I frowned, struggling. "Later, after I recovered, my parents arguing, words I didn't understand then, reckless, testing her limits, just like him." Holly watched me intensely. "Who's him?" "My uncle. He died before I was born, rock climbing accident." The pieces clicked together suddenly. My family has a history of risk-seeking behavior. My grandmother called it the Henderson curse. That's why Walsh wanted you in the study. Holly's voice was barely above a whisper. Genetic predisposition to high-risk behavior combined with trauma resilience. It's the perfect profile he's looking for. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My career choice wasn't just about fascination with dangerous creatures. It was encoded in my DNA, triggered by that childhood trauma. "This changes nothing," I finally said. "Even if I'm predisposed to seek danger, I choose how to channel it." Holly stood, relief visible in her posture. "That's what I've been trying to tell Walsh. His deterministic view ignores human agency." She helped me up, her touch lingering. "We should go before." The door handle jiggled, then came a key in the lock. Holly reacted instantly, closing files and pulling me behind a tall storage cabinet, just as Dr. Walsh entered with a woman I didn't recognize. "The Thompson research is yielding impressive results," Walsh was saying. "Particularly subject H2007. My code in the study." They were talking about me. "And the researcher herself?" the woman asked. "Is she containable?" "Dr. Thompson has developed unfortunate emotional attachments, but she'll be managed." From our hiding place, I felt Holly stiffen beside me. Her breath was warm against my neck as we pressed together in the narrow space. "And if she isn't?" The woman's voice was cold. "Then we proceed without her. The subject is what matters." They moved deeper into the lab, voices fading as they entered an adjoining room. Holly's eyes met mine in the dim light, Fear evident but also determination. Her hand found my cheek, a silent apology for everything that had led us here. Without thinking, I leaned forward, capturing her lips with mine. The kiss was different from our previous ones, not driven by passion or confusion, but by something more fundamental. Connection in the face of threat. When we separated, a silent understanding passed between us. Whatever Walsh had planned, we would face it together. The accusation came 3 days later. "Your last venom sample was contaminated," Holly said, standing in my extraction room doorway. Her voice carried to where Dr. Mbeki, the Reptile Center's director, hovered behind her. "Impossible," I responded automatically. In 15 years, I'd never submitted a contaminated sample. Dr. Mbeki cleared his throat. "Maya, the protein analysis shows cellular debris. It's compromised the entire test batch for Dr. Thompson's research." Holly's green eyes were unreadable as she handed me the lab report. I scanned the technical jargon, blood rushing in my ears. This made no sense. I'd been meticulous as always. "I need to see my equipment," I said, moving toward the extraction room. Inside, I examined every tool with the precision that had kept me alive through thousands of extractions. Nothing seemed amiss until I reached the collection vials. The sterilization indicator strips showed the proper color change, but examining the glass under bright light revealed almost imperceptible smudges. "Someone handled these after sterilization," I said, looking up to find Holly watching me intently. Dr. Mbeki had disappeared. "Someone trying to discredit you, perhaps?" Holly suggested, closing the door behind her. "Walsh," I whispered, as understanding dawned. She nodded. "The board meets tomorrow to review your work. Walsh has convinced them that your compromised methods threaten the entire anti-venom project." My career, the one thing I'd always been certain of, hung in the balance. But why? "Control," Holly said simply. "If he destroys your professional credibility, who would believe anything you say about his research?" She moved closer, her voice dropping. "I've been searching his files. The company he's working with, it's Black River Security. They provide specialized personnel for high-risk environments worldwide. Mercenaries," I translated. "High-functioning danger addicts with exceptional stress resilience." She touched my arm. "People like you." The pieces aligned with terrible clarity. Walsh wasn't just studying people like me, he was identifying potential recruits, using the psychology experiment to map our capabilities and weaknesses. "What do we do?" I asked. "First, we fight for your reputation." Her jaw set with determination. "I'm testifying at tomorrow's board meeting." The next morning, I sat outside the conference room while my professional life was debated within. Through the glass walls, I could see Holly gesturing emphatically to the stern-faced board members. "Doctor." Walsh sat opposite her, his expression calm and reasonable, the trusted scientific authority against the emotional younger researcher. When they called me in, the board chairwoman's expression told me everything. "Miss Henderson, in light of the contamination incident, we're suspending your extraction privileges pending a full review." The room tilted slightly. Extraction was everything to me. "If I may," Holly interjected, standing, "I'd like to present additional findings. The contamination pattern is inconsistent with handling error. It shows deliberate introduction of foreign material." "Dr. Thompson," Walsh cut in smoothly, "your judgment in this matter is compromised by your personal relationship with Ms. Henderson." The chairwoman's eyebrows rose. Holly's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. "My relationship status is irrelevant to the scientific evidence," she countered. "The spectroscopic analysis clearly shows." "Your funding comes through my department, Dr. Thompson," Walsh interrupted. "Perhaps you should consider your position carefully." The threat hung in the air, naked and ugly. "Are you suggesting I should falsify my professional opinion to protect my funding?" Holly's voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm suggesting you've become emotionally invested in ways that cloud your scientific judgment." Walsh's smile never reached his eyes. "It happens to the best of us." I watched Holly's shoulders straighten, her chin lift. In that moment, she looked like someone I barely recognized, not the woman who'd observed me through one-way glass or who'd melted in my arms, but someone fiercer. "If that's the case," she said clearly, "I'll tender my resignation rather than compromise my integrity." A murmur went through the board members. "Holly, don't," I whispered. But she was already placing her research credentials on the table. The contamination was deliberate sabotage, she stated firmly. I stake my professional reputation on it. And if this board cannot recognize that, perhaps Black River Security would be interested in why their recruitment pipeline is being protected so aggressively. Walsh's face drained of color. That's classified information. Not anymore, Holly replied. She turned to the confused board members. Dr. Walsh has been using this institution to psychologically profile potential recruits for private military contractors, without consent. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Through it all, Holly moved to stand beside me, her hand finding mine under the table. You didn't have to do that, I murmured. Yes, I did. Her fingers intertwined with mine. Some things matter more than careers. As the board demanded explanations from Walsh, he fixed us with a cold stare that promised this wasn't over. Later, in the privacy of Holly's apartment, surrounded by hastily packed research notes, the adrenaline finally wore off. We collapsed onto her couch, the weight of what had happened settling over us. I just torpedoed a decade of work, Holly said, disbelief in her voice. I pulled her against me, feeling the tremble in her body. You chose truth. It's what makes you different from Walsh. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. Without words, she drew me down into a kiss that quickly became more. We moved together with a desperate intensity, hands tugging at clothing, lips seeking bare skin. I need you, she whispered against my neck, guiding my hand between her legs. In the aftermath, tangled together on her couch, reality began to reassert itself. Walsh had connections, resources. The battle was far from over. What now? I asked into the quiet. Holly traced patterns on my bare shoulder. Now we gather evidence. And we fight back. We need to prove Walsh altered the results of the psychology experiment, Holly said 2 weeks later, pacing my living room. Her research notes were spread across my coffee table, a chaotic map of our investigation. Since the board meeting, we'd been working to build a case against Walsh. My extraction privileges had been reinstated conditionally, while the board conducted its own investigation into the contamination incident. The problem is accessing the original data, I replied, watching her move. Even stressed, she was beautiful, her red hair caught in a messy bun, her focus absolute. He'll have locked down everything after your resignation. Holly stopped pacing, a slow smile spreading across her face. Not everything. He doesn't know about my private backup server. You backed up the research? Hope sparked for the first time in days. Standard practice in case of system failure. She sat beside me, pulling her laptop closer. But Walsh doesn't know I included the raw data from your sessions. As she typed, I leaned against her shoulder, inhaling the now familiar scent of her shampoo, something herbal and clean. Despite everything, being near her still caused a flutter in my chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with our investigation. Here, she said finally, pointing to a side-by-side comparison on the screen. The original hypnosis transcript versus the one Walsh submitted to the board. The differences were subtle but critical. Words changed, responses altered. Walsh had systematically modified the data to emphasize my risk-seeking behavior while downplaying my risk management skills. He made me look unstable, I said, anger rising. A perfect recruit for an organization that needs people who'll take insane risks. Holly squeezed my hand. But we have proof now. A knock at the door interrupted us. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I vaguely recognized. Dr. Walsh's assistant from the Hartman Institute. Miss Henderson? Dr. Patel sent me, she said when I opened the door. From the ethics committee? She needs to speak with you both. Holly and I exchanged glances. Dr. Patel was leading the board's investigation. We were about to head out, Holly said cautiously. She said it's urgent, about the final experiment results. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't place it. We followed her to a waiting car, laptop and evidence safely in Holly's bag. Instead of the institute, we arrived at a small private laboratory in a business park on the outskirts of Nairobi. The building looked legitimate enough, with security guards and proper signage. Dr. Patel met us in a conference room, but her usual warmth was missing. Thank you for coming, she said stiffly. Before we could speak, the door opened again. Dr. Walsh entered with 2 men in suits. Black River representatives, Holly whispered to me, her body tensing. Dr. Thompson, Miss Henderson. Walsh's voice was smooth as oil. Thank you for bringing the final piece of our research together. What are you talking about? I demanded. The joint session. Walsh smiled thinly. The culmination of our study on complementary risk profiles. Dr. Patel avoided our eyes. She'd been pressured into this, that much was clear. We're not participating in anything, Holly stated firmly. Your contract specifies completion of all research phases, one of the Black River men said, unless you'd prefer legal action that would permanently end both your careers. We were trapped. Whatever they had planned, refusing would mean professional destruction. With a glance at Holly, I nodded slightly. We needed to play along until we found an opening. The joint session took place in a room similar to the one at the Hartman Institute. Walsh explained that he would hypnotize us together, exploring how our complementary psychological patterns interacted. Your relationship is fascinating from a research perspective, he said as he prepared the equipment. The venom collector and the anti-venom creator. Danger and safety. Perfect opposites drawn together. Under hypnosis, Walsh's questions probed our deepest fears and desires. Through the haze of suggestion, I heard Holly's responses mirroring my own in unexpected ways. Her controlled exterior hid a childhood marked by risk and loss. She sought safety in science the way I sought control in facing danger. You see, Walsh's voice floated above us. Subject pair H-27 and T14 demonstrate the ideal psychological balance for high-stress field operations. The Black River representatives were talking now, discussing deployment options and extraction protocols. Fighting through the hypnotic state, I reached for Holly's hand. The contact helped clear my mind, and I saw her eyelids flutter as she too struggled against Walsh's influence. Then chaos erupted. The laboratory door burst open. People in official-looking jackets swarmed in, shouting about search warrants and unauthorized human testing. One of the Black River men lunged for Holly's bag containing the laptop with our evidence. I reacted instinctively, the way I would with a striking snake, calculating trajectory, intercepting the threat. My body moved between him and Holly, taking the full impact as he crashed into me. Pain exploded in my back as I hit the edge of a steel table. Through blurring vision, I saw Holly wrestling the bag away while someone restrained the attacker. Then, across the room, a terrarium crashed to the floor, part of Walsh's naturalistic stress environment for the experiment. A Cape cobra, one of Africa's deadliest snakes, slithered free from the broken glass. People scattered, screaming. But Holly moved with surprising calm, positioning herself between the confused snake and the panicking crowd. Maya, she called steadily, I need you. Ignoring the pain in my back, I moved to her side. Together, we created a barrier, guiding the cobra away from the others. When it rose in defensive posture, I recognized the signs of an imminent strike. Without equipment, without protection, I did what 15 years of experience had taught me. I anticipated its movement and sidestepped, keeping Holly safely behind me. Trust me, I whispered to her. 6 months later, I stood in front of a gleaming new facility on the outskirts of Nairobi. Henderson Thompson Venom Research Center read the sign above the entrance, the lettering catching the morning sunlight. Still feels surreal, Holly said, slipping her hand into mine. Our own place. After the raid on Walsh's unauthorized experiment, everything had happened with dizzying speed. The evidence on Holly's laptop, combined with testimony from Dr. Patel and other researchers, had led to Walsh's arrest and Black River security facing international sanctions. The board that had once questioned my extraction techniques now offered substantial funding for independent research. Amazing how quickly perspectives shift when governmental ethics committees get involved. Ready to give me the tour? I asked, squeezing Holly's hand. Inside, the center was a perfect blend of our specialties, state-of-the-art extraction facilities alongside cutting-edge research laboratories. Staff members nodded respectfully as we passed. Most were young scientists Holly had recruited, passionate about revolutionizing anti-venom production. And this, Holly said with pride as we reached the final room, is our special project. The Universal Anti-Venom Lab contained equipment I'd only seen in scientific journals. At its center stood a specialized bioprocessor Holly had designed, capable of synthesizing antivenom components at unprecedented speeds. 3 more successful trials, she explained, and we can begin distribution to rural hospitals across sub-Saharan Africa. I watched her move among the equipment, explaining complex biochemical processes with animated gestures. This brilliant woman who had once observed me through one-way glass was now my partner in every sense: professional, personal, intimate. Dr. Thompson, a lab assistant, called from the doorway. The World Health Organization representatives have arrived early. Holly glanced at me apologetically. Duty calls. Go. I smiled. I'll check on the extraction team. In my own domain, a specialized extraction facility designed to my exact specifications, I found comfort in routine. Training new extractors was fulfilling in ways I hadn't anticipated, passing on techniques that had kept me alive through thousands of potentially deadly encounters. Later that evening, we sat on the balcony of our apartment overlooking Nairobi National Park. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, a perfect backdrop for what I had planned. Something on your mind? Holly asked, noting my unusual quietness. I reached into my pocket, fingers closing around the small object I'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. I've been thinking about our first meeting, I began. How we both dressed as snake charmers. Pure calculation on my part, she admitted with a smile. Though it worked out rather well. It did. I took her hand. You know, in all my years of handling venomous creatures, I never understood why anyone would call falling in love being bitten by the bug. Holly laughed softly. And now? Now I get it. I pulled out the ring, its central stone surrounded by a delicate design. It's the perfect venom, it changes you completely, but you don't want the antidote. Her eyes widened as I opened the tiny vial embedded in the ring's setting. Inside was a clear liquid. Is that cobra venom? I confirmed. Non-toxic amount, chemically neutralized, symbolic. Of what? How something that could kill can instead transform. How two people with opposing specialties can create something new together. I held the ring up to the fading light. Will you marry me, Holly? Tears glistened in her eyes as she extended her hand. Yes. As I slipped the ring onto her finger, a soft breeze carried the distant sounds of the savannah to us, natural and wild, like our beginning. The psychology experiment revealed one true thing, Holly said, examining her ring. We both seek edges, you in physical danger, me in scientific discovery. Together, we balance each other. Speaking of the experiment, I said, the ethics committee sent final notification today. All of Walsh's research has been sealed, participants notified. Closure. Holly nodded. Finally? Later that night, tangled in sheets and each other, Holly traced the scar on my back from the laboratory incident. Does it still hurt? Only when it rains, I murmured. Small price to pay. For what? Finding you. I turned to face her. Even if the path was unorthodox. She laughed softly. That's one word for it. Manipulative psychological experiment leading to international research scandal is another. I kissed her, silencing the self-recrimination I still occasionally heard in her voice. The beginning doesn't matter as much as where we ended up. 2 weeks later, we stood before the assembled staff of our research center, announcing not just our engagement, but the successful preliminary trials of Holly's universal antivenom. To the future, I said, raising a champagne glass. To venom and its antidote, Holly added, her eyes meeting mine over the rim of her glass. As applause filled the room, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here, from a Halloween party with matching costumes to building a research center that would save thousands of lives. Sometimes the most powerful transformations begin with poison. Sometimes the perfect cure comes from understanding the very thing that might destroy you. And sometimes the most unexpected experiments yield the most beautiful results.